You're listening to CX Passport, the show about creating great customer experiences with a dash of travel talk. Each episode, we'll talk with our guest about great CX, travel, and just like the best journeys, explore new directions we never anticipated. I'm your host, Rick Denton. I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport. Let's get going. Today's guest, John Billings of Hilton, embodies the spirit of CX Passport, where we combine customer experience and travel. John and I came to know each other a few years ago, where I learned more about his deep experience working with global BPOs, especially in the customer contact space. What's cool about John is that he's been on both sides of that world. He's been both the BPO provider and the BPO customer. His travels, both personal and business, have taken him all over the world, causing John and me to lose quite a bit of productivity swapping travel stories together. It's all been worth it, though, because at his heart, John really has a sense of the customer, and he strives to design a world that gives that customer what they want and need. And we'll learn why business travel to lands of beaches and sun isn't quite what you think it would be. John, welcome to CX Passport.
Thanks, Rick, for inviting me. It's great to be here.
Looking forward to this. So let's just start high level and talk about BPO in general. Why does a company start to look at a BPO, and how do you go into selecting a BPO partner? What's the thought process there?
Absolutely. There are a number of reasons why a company might consider working with a BPO. Agility, flexibility, and scalability are one reason. For example, earlier this year, the pace of the travel recovery picked up much faster than we expected, which caused us to really lean into our BPO partnerships. They could recruit, they could onboard, they could train agents much faster than we could here in the U.S. To meet demand, we ended up hiring over 3,000 agents across our various BPO sites over a period of just a couple of months. Something that we couldn't have done if we had limited the scope of that hiring to our captive operation in the U.S. We also think about business continuity and the ability to support irregular operations. Some of this ties back to the ability to scale that I had previously mentioned, but also by spreading our contacts across several partner sites. If we have a disruption in one location, for example, we can simply reroute contacts across the rest of the network to minimize the impact. BPOs also give us the ability to optimize performance and cost. And I want to be clear, it's not just about the lowest cost, but about the best cost. And obviously those factors vary from company to company, right? Our BPO partners also allow our captive agents to enjoy their holidays. Usually contact volume is a bit lower on days like July 4th or Labor Day or Thanksgiving Day or Christmas Day. So we shut down our captive operation here in the U.S. whenever possible and have our partners work those days. And the same goes for overnight hours as well. Some other things that we think about, there are certain languages that we can't easily source in the U.S. So our BPO partners help us fill the gaps there as well. And lastly, there's something to be said about the diversity of thought that a third party brings to the table. Our company is in the hospitality industry, and while we have a lot of really smart people who have lots of experience running contact centers, that's not necessarily our core competency. BPOs, that's what they do, and they do it really well. They know how to recruit, hire, and train agents at scale. They have the facilities, they have the technology and the telephony infrastructure. They know the local labor laws. They have the human capital, so they can help us plug the gaps in all of those different areas. In terms about how we go about selecting a partner, there are a number of factors there that we look at as well. We look at the history of the company. Do they have experience handling reservations and customer care, which is something that we're looking to outsource. It doesn't necessarily have to be in travel and hospitality, but that's certainly a plus. We look at their attrition stats. Can they keep agents? Depending on the scope of the need that we have, we look at their ability to handle multiple languages, the locations that they're proposing. Are they accessible? Are they politically stable? We clearly lay out legal terms and provide an example of our legal documents to make sure there are no surprises when we go to actually contract. And we try to get a feel for the leadership team, certainly at the executive level. Do they seem that they will be easy to work with? Do their values and culture align with ours? And would they look to us as a valued partner, or are we just another logo that they can use for their next sales pitch? We try to assess the team that will be managing our
Yeah.
account managers. You want me to keep on going, Rick, or how do you want?
I can tell.
Am I getting a little long on you?
No, you're not getting long on me, but I can tell this. There's a lot of value in the BPO. And I like that you kind of led off at the beginning that it's not, let's go back to that cost statement. It's not about just finding the lowest cost.
Yeah.
I think initially a lot of us think that about the BPO space. A lot of us are assuming where can we just find the cheapest cost? And perhaps that's where a lot of this world got started. And I think a lot of that too is where perhaps this world got a bad name, a bad rap, that by choosing a lower cost provider, that it doesn't allow for some of the other great things that you talked about: alignment with the brand, alignment with how, care for the customer and hospitality, if you've got that. Or you said something at the end that I want to unpack a little bit here, John, and that is that partnership. And if a BPO is in its correct space and relationship with the brand, it really becomes an extension of the brand. I would imagine that you'd want it to be at a point where the customer doesn't even know whether they're dealing with a BPO or whether they're dealing with your term captive agent, an employee of the brand. So that means you have to have the BPOs able to understand your business. So tell me, selection's one thing, but there's an ongoing relationship. How do you help get that relationship into a true partnership rather than just vendor-client relationship?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a really important one because, as you mentioned, we don't want the guest thinking about who might be taking that call. We want them to have the confidence that we're providing the best solution to fit their needs when it comes to selecting a hotel, and also that the agents are trained and empowered to resolve their issue if they're contacting us about a post-booking issue, for example. To get that right, it all starts with training, building in content about our culture, our brands, the various room types, for example, things like that. But it goes much farther than that. In locations where we have a hotel, which is where most of our BPO contact center locations are, we have the agents tour a local property during their training to experience the product firsthand and see how our teams on property create that guest experience. And we also do something that I think is fairly unique, at least in the travel industry. We extend our employee travel privileges to our BPO agents.
Really?
So they can experience firsthand, so they get the exact same travel privileges that I get. We want them to experience our various brands so they can understand what it's like to go through the booking process, the check-in process, the various features of our hotels, the food and beverage options, et cetera. I haven't talked to another hospitality or travel brand that does something like that. So like I said, I think it's very unique. And lastly, of course, we want our partners to make sure that the production floor is branded so that when you enter the floor, it looks like you're walking into one of our Hilton contact centers. That's really important to build an affinity for the brand.
So my brain froze a bit when you said that you extend the full brand benefits to the BPOs. I'm already envisioning, okay, how do I get a gig with one of the BPOs and how do I then book at, Punta Mita, the Waldorf that's out there? I may have the wrong Mexican beach, but there's a place that I want to get to that would be spectacular with a Hilton benefit. So great. So we've got the brand alignment and that's in place. But there's also that delivery of great CX. And the customer will, as you hope, will see no separation between brand and BPO. So how are you ensuring kind of that delivery of great CX through the BPOs while keeping those brand standards strong as well?
Sure. Yeah. As mentioned earlier, it starts with training. And we have a really great learning and development team that understands how to work with the BPOs, has an appreciation for the cultural differences in the various locations where we have BPO locations. And as I mentioned earlier, we brand the centers to visually remind the agents about the culture and the various brands. And I have a really great group of partner managers who are constantly in contact with our partners. Mm-hmm. They are really crucial to ensuring that everything we've instilled in training stays alive once the initial training process ends. They're looking at performance data, coordinating with the site leaders and partner leadership. They're conducting focus groups with the agents. And in general, they're the ones that are responsible for ensuring the partners instill the culture and hold the partners accountable for performance. And we supplement all of that with regular business reviews and site visits. With the pandemic, obviously, we've had to pull back on those a bit over the past 18 months. But we're starting to get out there a bit more, right? We're visiting one of our partners or we just completed a visit with one of our partners in the Caribbean recently, and it felt really, really good to get on site and engage with the teams, right? Because there's so much that you can pick up when you visit in person that's quite honestly very difficult to do when you're meeting with the teams virtually.
I know you and I will talk about travel, and that's something that I've missed. I know that you've missed. I did get to do a little bit of business travel this summer and did almost exclusively stay inside the Hilton brand. So y'all can be happy about that. There were a couple locations where y'all weren't represented and I had to go outside. But I did have a conversation with Clinton Cohen, and he's out of South Africa. He's got a BPO company there as well. One of the things we talked about was there's a lot of insights that the BPO passes back to the brand. So you and I have been talking about how do we keep the BPO in line with brand standards and delivery of CX. Are you finding that when it is in that true partnership that you're almost, I wouldn't say learning as much from the BPO, but you're actually gaining a unique sense of customer insight from your BPOs? And how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we ask the partners to provide insights back to us, help us understand the contact types, what they're hearing from the customers, because I mean, they're on the front lines, right? Yeah. I'm sitting right now I'm sitting in my home in Dallas, but I'm sitting in an office in Dallas, and we're not the ones that are directly engaging with the partner, with the guests. They're the ones that are doing that. So it's, they could provide that insights that we don't have sitting in an office. That's away from the contact centers.
I like that. And including the front line and that approach of it doesn't matter whether the front line is BPO or whether it's internal Hilton, that is their insights are there. Ultimately, we're talking about humans here, right? We're using these labels of BPO and captive and that. We're talking about humans, frontline humans who are directly touching the customer. And we know that great CX requires great employee experience. How do you engage with the BPO at the agent level? We talked a little bit about it. I'd love to expand that, building the affinity and connection of the brand. But especially when this isn't, quote, your company, how do you ensure employee engagement in the BPO?
Yeah, that's where the site visits are so critical in our minds. Engaging with the agents, engaging with the leadership teams, sitting side by side with the agents when they take a call and observing the experience that they're delivering to our guests. When we go on site, we make it a point to celebrate with the teams as well. We do rewards and recognition ceremonies, recognizing agents for achieving various KPIs and delivering great experiences. Hospitality is all about making a human connection. That's critically important, right? And we can't check that at the contact center door and expect to be successful if we throw the work over the fence and just have our partners do all the work without any support from us.
All right, so we haven't talked about where all these partners are, but I happen to know they are all over the globe. And you, John, have had a need to spend a little time in the lounge in some of your travels, I'm sure. So join me here in the first class lounge. We'll move quickly here and hopefully have a little bit of fun. What is a dream travel location from your past?
My family's happy place is a little surf town on the Pacific coast of British Columbia. It's called Tofino. My wife and I first discovered it back in 1999 and make it back there about every 3 or 4 years. Thinking back on it, it was a sign that I was destined to work in the hospitality industry because we found out about it through a magazine that highlighted some of the best hotels in the world. And it was called the Wickeninish Inn in Tofino that was written up, and that provided that nucleus for going there. You really have to want to go there. It's not easy to get to. You fly to Vancouver, you drive for about 45 minutes to the ferry terminal, then you take a 2-hour ferry ride across the Strait of Georgia, then you have to drive for 3 hours over the mountains to get to the west coast of Vancouver Island. But it's so worth it. It's so beautiful, so remote, though admittedly it's been discovered. And we're getting... we're seeing it get a bit more crowded every time we go there, which, on some level breaks our hearts. We planned to go there each of the last 2 summers, but unfortunately due to COVID, we've had to reschedule. But keeping our fingers crossed that we can make the trip next summer.
Do you want me to misspell it in the show notes so that people don't know where to find it? So that as they're...
I like that plan. Good call.
Tofino, it's in British. How about the British Isles? Yes, that's where it is. It's in the UK.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that.
Coast of Canada or somewhere else. Yeah.
So everybody enjoy what John has told you, but don't go there, and just read about it. Right. So.
Yes.
What is
look at it virtually.
That's right. What is a dream travel location you've not been to yet?
Yeah, that's it's hard to nail down. We're always dreaming of travel in the Billings house, and we have tons of ideas. We have some close friends that we travel with. The last couple of years, we've been to London and Portugal, and this summer we stayed a little bit closer home. We went to Boston, we went to Colorado.
Nice.
And we're planning a trip to Spain over Thanksgiving with them. When we're together, we encourage everybody, the adults and the kids, to come up with ideas. We have a dinner and we talk about where do we want to go next. And we have quite a list. Malta, Morocco, Singapore, lots of other places. But I think Argentina is probably highest on the list right now.
Yeah.
We would love to spend time in Buenos Aires, which I've heard is an incredible city with a very European influence. Then we go to Iguazu Falls, then travel down to Ushuaia in the Patagonia region at the very southern tip of South America. So I'm hoping we can do that sometime in the next couple of years.
I need to get into y'all's dinners. That is a dream travel location of mine as well. There's something about, yes, the European, and I've heard the beef. Even those of us here in North Texas, I've heard the beef is fantastic. But there's something about the remoteness of Patagonia that I really want to experience. And I might bip over to Chile just so that I could say I was skiing in July as well. So there's a little bit of...
I'm with you. That'd be neat. That'd be great.
Speaking of, I mentioned beef, but what is a favorite thing for you to eat?
Yeah, you talked about beef in Texas. I mean, it's so hard to narrow it down, but living in Texas, it's actually, Tex-Mex is a staple here, right? So I'd say it's a toss-up between that and actually sushi. But then there's Indian food. That's high on my list as well. My first trip to India, this is interesting. So it was about 14 or 15 years ago. I was scared to death about eating in India. I just, it was an unfamiliar food to me. I just wasn't sure what to expect. So I packed a bunch of dry goods in my suitcase.
Oh, my gosh.
Granola bars, raisins, anything I could think of that would travel well. Thinking that I was going to starve over there. And, needless to say, I don't lose any weight when I go to India anymore. I absolutely love the food. So
it is funny how naive we can be as Americans sometimes, thinking, oh, no, I don't want to try. Now, that is not, thankfully, that I'll get in there and try it. I've got some stories from some of my travels with JCPenney of foods that we won't describe here in some of the lands that I've been to. But it is, I have traveled with people that did the same thing, that had a suitcase of peanut butter crackers, and I'm thinking, no, you've got to try this. So I'm glad that you have converted and are not packing the dry goods anymore.
Nope,
well,
not anymore.
Let's talk about this then. On the flip side, what is a thing your parents forced you to eat but you hated as a kid?
Cheese. I just can't stand the texture, and I don't like the taste. When I was a kid, I tried all the tricks to get out of eating those. All the stuff that every parent knows about, of course, right? Like covering them up with my napkin, or, putting some in my mouth and then politely excusing myself to go to the bathroom, stuff like that. Obviously, it never worked. But, now that I'm an adult, I do anything I can to avoid peas. They're not forced on me anymore.
I always liked peas, but it's come up a couple times here. So with you being a big traveler, and of course you can't tell me your phone, you can't tell me your passport, but what is one travel item you will not leave home without?
Yeah, I'm probably going to cheat a little bit because it's on my phone, but I travel internationally for work for the most part, and that requires that I sometimes have to sleep at very odd hours. For example, when I go to India or the Philippines, I work U.S. daytime hours, which is the overnight shift in those locations, and I sleep during the day. So as a result, I always make sure that I have the most current version of Sleep Machine. It's a white noise app that's on my phone that's loaded with different sounds to help block out the noise from outside of the hotel or from the hotel staff going about their business throughout the day, or just to help me relax on a long flight.
Oh, John, with that kind of travel, let's stick with travel a bit. I can see why you want the sleep machine, especially if you're having to sleep during the day. Well, that may be a part of this next question. So I know that BPOs are often in great and exotic places. Yeah, but tell me what it's like to be a business traveler to a leisure destination.
Yeah, it's interesting, that's for sure. We have a couple of BPO centers in particular that are in kind of very leisure-oriented locations.
Okay.
We have one in Singapore, India, and one in Montego Bay, Jamaica.
Oh, yeah.
it's a tough gig, let me tell you. But you can always tell who we are, right? We're the ones that are wearing kind of the standard issue business outfit, carrying our laptop bags at the hotel restaurant. We quickly grab something on our way out the door. It's particularly hard in Jamaica, where everybody else is getting ready to go to the pool for the day or out on a local tour. They're wearing their flip-flops and shorts, and here we all are all dressed up. It's really tempting to want to play hooky down there. In India, because we work U.S. business hours, as I mentioned earlier, we're typically heading out to the office in the late afternoon, just as people are returning from their tours and the tours of the local cultural sites.
Yeah.
And when we come back to the hotel, it's in the middle of the night. As they're polishing the floors in the lobby and getting ready for the next day. So in places like that, or in the Philippines, as I mentioned, I work U.S. daytime hours, so that means I'm sleeping during the day, and I have to be really deliberate about my routine and really adept at learning how to sleep during the day. So we'll come back from work, we'll grab dinner, which is really breakfast locally, and then head up to the room and try to sleep. I do have my routine. I put on the do not disturb sign. I turn on the sleep machine app, as I mentioned earlier. I grab the eye shades, and then I try to crash. When I first started traveling to the Philippines, I was just really freaked out when the sun would come up. We'd be heading back to the hotel and the sun would be coming up. And I was just panicked that I wasn't going to go to sleep. But you get used to it. And like I said, we all have our routines to help us out.
Yeah.
There's actually an unintended benefit too. I'm unfortunate that I really don't suffer the effects of jet lag because for the most part, I'm able to keep my body clock on U.S. time.
That's what I was thinking about when you were saying that. Now, I feel sad for you in the Jamaica travel. I have seen those folks. I've seen them on the planes, and I've thought, oh, I'm sorry, as I have my cocktail in my hand or my flip-flops on my feet. But the jet lag, that's interesting. That yes, you have to sleep during the day, but as those of us that have traveled the globe know, the pains of jet lag are real, and avoiding it would be a nice thing to have. Well, let's think more about, I still want to stay with your travels around the world, but you've seen so many different global cultures. You've seen so many different approaches to what hospitality means and your work in the hospitality space. So I'm kind of curious, what does hospitality around the world look like to you?
Yeah, on some level, I mean, hospitality, and it's hospitality. It's the friendly employees who anticipate your needs, create meaningful connections with their guests, the comfortable rooms that are designed for relaxing and working, the restaurants with the expensive menus. But in some locations, there are noticeable differences. In places like India, for example, I mean, hotels they seem to have higher staff to guest ratios, so there's always somebody there to open a door, assist with your luggage, bring things up to the room, or provide turn-down service in the evenings. The higher staff ratios may be a perception on my part. I mean, keep in mind, I run contact centers. I'm not responsible for hotel staffing,
right.
But it certainly feels like there's a higher level of staffing. And people in India are just really warm, very friendly people with a strong hospitality culture. So the experience there, from what I've observed during my travels, is just on a different level. They really go out of their way to make you feel comfortable. And I've also noticed that in other locations in Asia as well. And the sheer opulence of the hotels throughout Asia is really unique. We have some very beautiful hotels throughout the region that are just incredibly ornate with these very architecturally distinctive design details. So the combination of the top facilities and experiencing that type of service firsthand makes me, really want to find ways to emulate the on-property guest experience through phone calls, emails, and chats.
I can see that, right? So if you've seen that high touch, that warmth, there was a guest, Gavin Scott, as a few episodes ago. Yeah, let's see, he was episode 32, and he talked about his wife and he's out of the UK, and so his wife and he did their honeymoon in Sharm el Sheikh. I may get that a little bit wrong, in Egypt. And as they approach the resort that they were staying, the warmth with which they were greeting. He talked about there was actually a band that played "Here Comes the Bride," and I mean they went over the top for them. And that kind of warmth, you do feel that when you leave and travel to certain areas and certain regions. And I felt that too in Asia and India, as you're describing. but bringing that back into the contact center and delivering that sense of connectivity, delivering that sense of warmth. I think when we get out there and see what it's like in the human to human touch space, then other elements of contact center, how do we bring that into the contact center, makes a lot of sense. Let's close out here. We're unfortunately getting towards the end of time. John, I would like to talk to you more about some of your travels, but let's close out by talking about the overall industry, just in general. So what are you seeing in the BPO industry as far as location growth and change?
Yeah, I'm hearing more and more about South Africa these days.
Yeah.
That market is traditionally focused on Europe, given the overlap in time zones and some of the colonial history with the countries like the Netherlands and Portugal and France. But now they're working hard to extend their services to the U.S., and they're having more and more success with the South African government playing a strong supporting role there. And speaking of the African continent, I've heard some folks talking about places like Kenya, which is really interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not anything that would have been top of mind, certainly, but I'm hearing more and more of that. From a nearshore perspective, there's lots to talk about Colombia right now and Honduras. The outsourcing industry has traditionally focused on Central America, so namely Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala. But now they're extending into the northern tier countries of South America and traditionally untapped markets in Central America as well. You're also starting to hear about some of the smaller islands in the Caribbean. That's a region that's been dominated, at least from a BPO perspective, by Jamaica and the Dominican Republic. But now companies are starting to invest in places like St. Lucia, Barbados, Grenada. Yeah, those places have much smaller populations, so there's not this huge labor market there, but the English skills are really good, and their local governments are starting to realize that the BPO industry can bring in really good, stable jobs to the region. And they're starting to invest in the infrastructure and training to make their labor pools more marketable to the industry.
Interesting. So I'd heard South Africa. That's one that is becoming, I don't want to use the word trendy, but you hear about it a lot more. Hadn't heard of Kenya. The Central American ones don't surprise me to see those starting to grow, but the smaller Caribbean islands, that's interesting. So what that means, John, is that there will be a higher likelihood that I will be on a flight to a beach destination and I will see you in your business casual attire as I am sipping a nice gin and tonic.
And my laptop bag, and I'll be waving as I go to work, right? And you're on your second drink. So,
I'll try to be kind to you. Well, John, thanks so much for talking with me today on CX Passport. I've enjoyed learning certainly more about the BPO industry, and I always just enjoy talking with you, right? I hope that we haven't lost too much productivity between each other as we talk travel stories today as well. It's enjoyable, and I hope that you do get back out on the road soon. I know you're looking forward to that, and that will then provide more fodder for great stories for me to hear from you in the future. John, thanks so much for being a part of CX Passport today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rick, for having me.
Thanks for joining us this week on CX Passport. Make sure to visit our website, cxpassport.com, where you can hit subscribe so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, you can check out the rest of the EX for CX website. If you're looking to get real about customer experience, EX for CX is available to help you increase revenue by starting to listen to your customers and create great experiences for every customer, every time. Thanks for listening to CX Passport, and be sure to tune in for our next episode. Until next time, I'm Rick Denton, and I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport.